Let's go ahead and talk about debt again. But this time, we're not just acknowledging the monster, we're learning how to tame it. If you watched the last episode, you'll remember we talked about what I call the debt monster, the scary, shadowy figure that lives under your financial bed when we avoid looking at what we owe, trying to pull the covers up over our eyes. In that video, I challenged you to take a really brave step, to open up every single account that you have and make a list of all of your debts. If you haven't done that yet, I highly recommend hitting pause on this video and going back and watching that one. I'll go ahead and link it up above and down in the description. Because in the end, it's not just about these numbers, it's about honesty and clarity with yourself. Now, if you've already made this list, you're ready for the next step, and we're turning that raw data into a plan. Because debt isn't just about numbers. It's emotional, it's heavy, it weighs on our self-worth, and it can impact every part of our life. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're not alone. But here's the thing, facing your debt was only step one. Now it's time to start the climb. Hey there, I'm Brett. Welcome back to Pocket Changes, where we're talking real stories, small steps, and finding clarity in your spending plan, all without the guilt trip. Today we're going to be talking about practical ways to pay down your debt in a way that works for you. Because debt is emotionally exhausting. That's not a weakness, it's just reality. And choosing a way to pay off, choosing a method to pay off your debt should support you emotionally. It shouldn't drain you further. And that's why there's no one right way to do it. So today we're going to be talking about two popular strategies, the Avalanche Method and the Snowball Method. And then I'm going to go ahead and mention a nice hybrid approach toward the end. We're going to go ahead and break down how each one of these works, which one might be right for you, and how to stay in control. Now, before we get into the details, let's get one thing clear. With any of these debt payoff strategies, the baseline behavior stays the same. You're still making all of your minimum payments on time. That one is a non-negotiable. We're not skipping payments or defaulting on anything. We're staying current on all of our debts across the board. What changes is where your extra money will go. You can think of that extra money as your debt attack fund, if you will. And each method, no matter what you choose, gives you a different strategy for deciding which debt gets prioritized first. In the end, we're not creating any extra debt while we're working with these strategies. We're simply organizing how we're going to crush it. Got it? Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and meet our different methods. But to do that, we need to have an example. So to keep things simple and relatable, we're going to walk through each of these methods using the same set of debts. We're going to have 5 debts, starting with credit card A, that's going to have a $500 balance at 18% with a minimum payment of $25 a month. Debt 2 is our credit card B with a $2,500 balance, but it had a special starting rate, so it's got 0% interest for now, but it does have a minimum payment of $50. Debt 3 is a payday loan, and this one's brutal. It's got a balance of $3,000, but it has a 45% interest rate. The minimum payment on this one is $100. Debt 4 is a personal loan that we took out that's a $7,000 balance at 7% with a minimum payment of $150 a month. And finally, we also have an auto loan for $10,000 at 4% interest, and that one has a minimum payment of $175. All of those minimum payments total up to about $500 a month that we have in obligations to debt. So let's imagine that we have $500 each month that we can put towards paying off our debt. After making those minimum payments, which again total that same $500, there's nothing left over for extra payments. But if our situation allows us to free up an extra $200 a month, asking for a raise at work, working overtime, doing a side gig, or cutting back in any other areas, we're finding that extra $200, we're able to bring up our debt repayment category to $700 a month. And we can use that extra $200 to strategically tackle the debts that we need based off the strategy and the method that we choose. So let's go ahead and picture this. We've got all 5 of our debts lined up in front of us. With the Avalanche Method, it's going to tell us to ignore the balances on any of our debts, and instead we're going straight for the one with the highest interest rate. And why do we do that? Because the interest rate is working against us every single day. You can almost think of it like a sinking ship where we're bailing out water. It's best to treat the biggest leak first because that's going to keep us afloat longer. So in our case, with our examples, that's going to be our payday loan at 45%. Ouch. So we're going to throw all of our extra cash at that beast until it's gone. Afterwards, we're going to move down the list in order of interest rate, moving on to credit card A at 18%, then the personal loan at 7%, the auto loan at 4%, and finishing off with that credit card at 0%. The Avalanche method is the math-savvy method. You'll pay less in interest overall, and that adds up. With our example, our total timeline to pay all of these debts off is right at 36 months, so 3 years. The total interest paid with this method is around $2,400. Now with this method, it takes us 13 months to pay off the first debt. After that, it takes an additional month to pay off the second, then 12 more months for the third, then 9 months for the fourth, finally 1 more month to pay off that last debt. So keep in mind, this can feel a bit slow. In our example, it takes over a year to pay off that first debt of diligent, consistent payments. And for some, that lack of momentum might make it harder to stay motivated for the long haul of debt payoff. And if that's the case, we might turn to the Snowball Method. So the Snowball Method is going to flip the script. It's going to say, forget the interest rate. Let's get you some quick wins by looking at the amount owed and starting with the smallest. So with this method, we're going to begin with credit card A that had that $500 balance. After that, we move on to credit card B, even though it's at 0%, because it's the next smallest amount at $2,500. After that, we'll move on to the payday loan for $3,000, then the personal loan for $7,000, and finally the auto loan for $10,000. Each time you knock out a debt, you're going to be freeing up more money with that minimum payment for the next one. And it's going to build momentum a lot like a snowball, starting out small, but getting bigger and bigger as it rolls downhill. With this method, our timeline shifts to 39 months, so it is 3 months more than the Avalanche method. Our total interest paid is about $3,500, so $1,100 more than the Avalanche method. But with this method, our first debt is paid off in 4 months as opposed to 13 months with the Avalanche method. That second debt is then 8 months after that, the third is 10 months later, then the fourth is 9 months later, and the last debt is paid off 8 months after that. It does cost more in interest, absolutely. But that fast progress with that first win can be a huge emotional and psychological win. And when you're dealing with something as heavy and emotional as debt, that psychological boost might just be the thing that keeps you going. For our example, each debt was around 4 to 8 months of work. Whereas with the Avalanche method, some debts required 9 to 13 months to finish off. Now, what if you want the best of both worlds? That's where a hybrid approach might come in. And with this type of a method, we might still start with a small, emotionally satisfying win. So let's start with credit card A at $500. But then we're going to get a little more strategic. So instead of tackling credit card B, which is our next smallest amount, since it has a 0% interest rate, we're going to toss that to the end. And we're going to jump instead to that payday loan because it's bleeding us dry with that 45% interest accrued daily. So we're going to be blending the emotional lift and the emotional win of the Snowball method because we're still going to get that first win in 4 months. But we're going to blend that with the financial efficiency of the Avalanche method, reducing our interest payments overall. So with a hybrid approach, our order might become credit card A with $500 at 18%, then the payday loan for $3,000 at 45%, then the personal loan for $7,000 at 7%, the auto loan $10,000 at 4%, and finally that $2,500 credit card at 0%. With this type of a method in this order, our timeline shifts once more and it'll take about 37 months to pay all of this off. So 1 month longer than the Avalanche method, but 2 months faster than the Snowball method. The total interest paid with this method is about $2,500. So about $100 more than the Avalanche method that we saw, but still $1,000 less than the Snowball method. So as you can see, it's not quite as fast or as cheap as Avalanche, but it still gives you that solid emotional and financial return. And sometimes that balance is exactly what's needed to keep you going. So which method is best? And for that, we need to get real for a second, because if this were just about math, every single one of us would choose the Avalanche method every single time. But it's not just a math problem. It's a you problem. It's a mindset problem. It's an emotional problem. It's a life problem. Because if you start with the Avalanche method, but you feel like you're not getting anywhere after 6 months of diligent payments and you're not feeling that win, you might get discouraged. You might fall off the wagon and end up emotionally exhausted or financially stuck. And if that's the case, that most efficient method might actually become the most expensive because we're going to lose time and we might feel like we're going backwards. Because in the end, we're not just dealing with interest, we would be dealing with burnout. Now, debt payoff, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. So whatever method that we choose needs to be sustainable for us. And that's why the best method is going to be the one that works for you and your lifestyle. One that takes into account not just interest rates, but your headspace, your energy, your capacity. It all comes back to honesty and clarity, not just about your numbers, but about who you are as a person. So ask yourself, do you need momentum and quick wins to stay engaged? If that's the case, go with Snowball. Or do you thrive on squeezing out every single penny of efficiency? If that's the case, go with Avalanche. Maybe you'll ask, do you need a plan that honors both your emotions and the math? Go with a hybrid approach. Whatever your answer, knowledge is the power that you're looking for. You've seen the debt monster, and now you're planning your strategy. You're moving forward, and that's a huge win. So there's no shame in choosing the strategy that works best for you. Whether you're more numbers driven or emotionally driven, the best method is going to be the one that helps you move forward at a sustainable pace. You've already done the hardest part, seeing and adding up the debt. Now it's time to choose your plan, take your next step, and start climbing that mountain of debt. It might be a long journey ahead, but I promise you that it's a worthwhile one. So if you found this video helpful, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment. Which method are you leaning towards? Have you done one already? If so, what worked for you? Go ahead and leave it in the comments so that everybody else can learn from your experiences. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video where we're going to be talking about how to stick with debt payoff for the long haul, even when the road gets tough. You've got this.